Hi there again, welcome to this second video regarding templates. The previous one we looked at a general idea about why companies might use a template, things like house styles, different examples of companies and the house styles that they use. Now we're going to start looking at, okay, so we know why they might use a template, so now we can think about specific situations or items of software that they could use to create their template. Now in this video I can't actually physically show you any templates from the college, not least because they might change over time. Hopefully within the classroom I might be able to actually physically show you some. However, obviously this is going out onto YouTube, so I need to kind of be mindful about that. So ideas about why we might use a template. Obviously, like I said, we've got branding going on, we've got different kind of look and feel that companies want to give to people who are looking at the documentation and might be using their documentation, because especially for larger companies, if you have all of your documents looking quite haphazard, then it looks actually quite unprofessional. So I touched on that in the previous kind of video in terms of examples like Tesco, IKEA and so on. Now we're going to start looking at actual specific business documents for it. Now the good news is that if you're using Office, and indeed many other examples of desktop publishing, but Office is by far and away the most well used example of a desktop publishing suite, there's lots of examples of ones that are pre-made up, but of course what you have an issue with there is that you want to make sure that your template is actually unique. If you use one that's on Word, if you guys as students it might be like, okay, well, fine, but actually if you are a reasonable sized company, you don't want to have a template that everyone else has got. It just looks frankly quite a bit lazy, and then you have to think about what impression your company gives to people outside of the company. If you can't even be bothered to, or not able, even worse, if you don't go through the process of actually making your own set of templates for these documents. Now I'm going to use the college as an example here. Can you identify different examples of where the college can use templates? Now, if you can't think of any for the college, you can of course think about any business that maybe you're more familiar with, because actually a lot of companies will use templates, and they'll use very similar places where they would use the template. So it might be a guess on your part. I realise that sentence is not worded particularly well. Or it might be what's called hypotheticals. Hypothetical means that you're kind of trying to have a bit of a stab at it in the dark, so you're kind of thinking, okay, so in this kind of situation this is what I think will happen, as opposed to kind of being, okay, I know this is what will happen. So can you identify different examples of where the college could use templates? And I'll let you just pause the video for a couple of minutes just to have a little think about that. Obviously in class I will give you time to have a little think about it. Now what you should be coming up with are things like letters, emails, references, invoices, so all these type of things that you could potentially be sending out to stakeholders, and could be, remember, stakeholders, anybody who's involved with something, a project or a transaction, or whatever it might be. You want to try and give that professionalism, and obviously also within the company itself. That could be something that you are looking to try and do. Now obviously as a college, we will use these specific types of documents. For us, those are quite generic actually. I mean, you probably use them in most companies, but then if you are looking at other companies, you might use other types of template. For example, a receipt could be one of them. When you go into a shop and you buy something, you get a receipt, which is effectively a contract for an item that you've purchased. And generally, companies will want to brand it in some way. It's never that widely used in terms of, very few receipts you get are like in colour or have a colour logo on. Most of them are black and white, or I remember when I used to work in TK Maxx, I used to have red receipts. I guess that makes it easier for people to find. But nobody spends a huge amount of time actually making the receipt look amazingly beautiful. But what you can do is make sure the receipt looks very similar to all the other receipts that somebody. So let's say if you go to Tesco every receipt you get from Tesco is going to look very similar to each other. Probably will have a logo on it, but it's not going to be in colour or anything like that. So there's quite a few places where you could potentially do that. Also, I've just had one pop into my head, which of course is certification, which is where you guys as students, or you may not be a student at the college, you may be from outside the college, but when you finish a course, you get a certificate, and all of those will look the same. And you think about, okay, so actually it has to be like that, otherwise there's no guarantee that yes, okay, this is the certificate that you've achieved for gaining your digital course, your business course, your media course, whatever it might be, and you know that, yeah, okay, so it looks like all the other receipts we've had. Okay, so think about kind of reasons to why we might use templates. So you've got consistency in the way it looks, which improves professionalism. It just looks more professional. And obviously, if your company has a reputation of being professional, that is more often than not. I mean, I can't think of an example of the opposite to this, but more often than not, is going to be a good thing for your company. Especially if you're spending a lot of money with a company, and obviously that varies per person as to what they think is a lot of money. But if you're spending money with a company, you want them to be professional. Improves brand recognition. Again, you're trying to get into customers' head that, let's say for example you're thinking about, you want to buy a coffee machine, and I say that as I've just bought a coffee machine. So it's kind of the first one that popped into my head. And there are lots of different places where you can buy a coffee machine, and there are lots of different varieties of coffee machine. Some of them will have the ability to grind the coffee bean. I'm not going to go into specifics of coffee making, I think not on here. But anyway, there's lots of different types of coffee machine, and lots of different places where you can buy a coffee machine. So the companies that you might buy a coffee machine from, obviously a supermarket, but if you want a wider range, you probably will look at the stores that sell more hardware type items, and these advertise heavily, the likes of Currys, the likes of Argos, the likes of John Lewis. And that's the kind of purpose of advertising, and improving your brand recognition, that when you have a customer that's thinking, okay, I want to buy a coffee machine, where can I buy it from? You go to the places that you know and trust to begin with, and maybe you'll spend the time looking through all of their websites to actually find one that you really like or find a really good deal. But you'll start off in certain places, and once you find a product that you like, you just go and buy it. There's no real mileage and spending a lot of time not doing that. Now, I've just mentioned 3 quite big companies in Argos, Currys, John Lewis, right? But you can buy coffee machines from a wide number of different places. Maybe I was going to say individual hardware type stores that are, like non-chain type hardware stores, I guess you could say, and you just don't know about them because maybe we don't advertise as much. Now the cost is an obvious advantage as well, because once you've set your template up, your template can be reused many times. You don't have to remake your layout every time you start a new letter. It's already laid out for you, which is an obvious advantage. And the user will just load up the document and run with it. Okay. Now this is not a finite list, right? If you think of other examples of why templates could be good or bad, which will be the next slide, then by all means include it. Obviously, I can't have everything on one slide. You've got disadvantage. So I've got costs as an advantage, and I've got costs as a disadvantage. Well, you're thinking, well, why might that be? But actually, for some companies, particularly larger companies, if you are paying someone to set up things like your house star, to set up these templates, because possibly you can't do it yourself, or possibly you can, but you want somebody else to do it for you, that could be an initial expense. Okay, that could be an initial outlay that you have to pay for. People who create these things, companies that make these things, can run into the thousands of pounds. And I imagine that if you do, or if you are a really big company, then you're probably, if you want to have a rebrand, for example, that may run into more than that. I know a previous company that I worked for, I'm not going to say the name of it, but they had a rebrand. They changed their logo, and they didn't change their colour scheme so much, but certainly the way it looked and the general kind of themes were much more kind of light, as opposed to before where they were using a lot of darker blues, and now they wanted to use some lighter colours and have a lot more white space in their materials. And I know that when they redid their logo, for example, and all of that, they charged, or they were charged, thick end of £35,000 to do that, which is a tremendous amount. It's not isn't a large company particularly, and they've actually had to change their logo subsequently to that, because they've had investment from outside, and again they wanted more rebranding and even a different name. So what if templates are unavailable? Because where do you store templates? So you could store them on somewhere like an intranet. You could store them on a central area or folder that somebody would need to get to. And obviously, well, I'm talking about from a document perspective. Even if you have like a mold type thing, not very good English if you have a mold type thing, but you're still going to have to access it from somewhere. So imagine, let's say, for example, the college, all of our templates, which are mostly stored in our intranet. Imagine if our network goes down, which has happened in the past, then the access to those templates becomes much more difficult, and you'll have to kind of revert back to a previous one or your own version of it. There is no scope for creative flair. So what I mean by that is, if you have individuals who are trying to use this stuff, and you're not kind of giving them any scope to potentially use their own flair, okay, which might frustrate an employee, not an employer, or both maybe. I'm not so sure so much about this one. I think you do have to be careful, because if you had everybody who's creating their own individual kind of signatures and whatnot and on their emails, like I said, it might begin to look unprofessional. Somebody is invariably going to put something on there that they shouldn't. So you do have to be quite careful about that. And obviously the bottom one is an important one. If your template is designed badly, then everybody's going to have this really badly designed template that they're using, let's say for letters, or if your logo is really poor, or if your color scheme is really bad. Everybody's going to be using it, and everybody's going to look horrendous, and you're kind of just embedding this badly designed template all the time, which is obviously not what you want. And like I said, it's not an exhaustive list. Okay. Also, things like whenever you add new software in, I know this isn't in the bullet pointed list, whenever you add new software in, then previous templates may not just automatically update with it. So if you are, let's say for example, updating your Office suite, then there isn't a guarantee that your previous PowerPoint templates will work on the upgraded software. They probably should. You'd imagine they would, but there's no guarantee. There's been a number of examples where if companies have updated software, and it's more the operating system more than the actual suite itself, but they've updated the software and all of a sudden a load of programs have stopped working, which is not what you want, obviously. Okay, so I would like you, the students who are going to get this task, here's task 2 because it follows on from the task in the previous video, to go into Canva and to create your own video which discusses what a template is, a range of uses for the template, advantages and disadvantages for the use of templates. You could relate it to the college if that helps you to write about it, or you could relate it to a company that you're more familiar with. Let's say if you have a part-time job, happy for you to do that. But I think examples are going to be a really useful tool here to help you kind of really expand on your answer, rather than just kind of having a couple of words for each one, which is obviously not really suitable for a course of this level. So again, on Canva, make it look nice, make it look like it's attractive and engaging your audience, include transitions and animations. You don't need to stick all of your stuff on one slide. So let's say, for example, if you have a range of uses for a template, you could have a number of slides for that. Don't go into this thinking, oh, I must stick everything for each one of those different bullet points on one slide. It's a bit lazy, really, and actually not really what we expect at this level. We expect you to be able to really expand on the points that you're talking about. Now, obviously, the Canva can't go into Turnitin, but actually, you shouldn't really be copying anyway, because it's cheating. So you will be needing the published link, and that will go into the relevant Teams page later on. Now, I do just also want to show you some examples using. So I'm in PowerPoint at the minute. If I go into the PowerPoint, we can see if I go new, there's a wide range of different templates. Now, I know some of you have done this. You should have done this the previous unit prior to Christmas. Now, this makes it really easy to find one that's been set up nicely for you, and it's the same with Word. Okay, so you can go into Word and there's a number of different templates there for you, so you can see what letters, newsletters, and it's fine for something that may be small scale, or if you are inexperienced, which is what a number of you guys are. If you're kind of a larger company, you don't want to be using this stuff. It just looks, like I said, a bit lazy and unprofessional, but on a more local level, a smaller level, I mean, these will work just fine. Okay, so I want you just to be creating that Canva, submitting it, and then obviously we'll need to look to move towards you guys creating a template for items that you haven't done previously. So I appreciate that, for example, you've created a PowerPoint template previously, so I'm not going to ask you to do that again unless you haven't done it previously. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in a future video.